Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Hello, everybody. It's Aldo Gandia. Welcome to Greg Gabriel Talks Football. I just want to begin by letting you know we got a very busy day of programming here at the Bar Room. Besides this show, later this evening, the Double A team will have an outstanding show for you. One of their two guests is Chris Herring, the author of Blood in the Garden, the flagrant history of the 1990s New York Knicks. And if you're a Chicago Bulls fan like me, you know how much the New York Knicks went after Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, just trying to basically commit criminal mischief on them. So this is going to be an outstanding interview. Can't wait for that. And then we will close the day with Neil Stopchinski and Danny Shimon talking about the NFL scouting combine. But first, it is Greg Gabriel Talks Football, and there he is right there. Greg, how are you, my friend?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Good. Now, you were at the gym at about 5:30 this morning. So
I got up at 5:30. I was at the gym just shortly after that.
Wow. So you must be tired right about now, right?
I am.
But that doesn't stop Greg Gabriel. We've got a lot to talk about because since we last did a show, we heard from Ryan Poles, Matt Eberfus. We had this NFL scouting combine. There's a lot to talk about just within those things. And so let us start first with the topic of weight for the offensive lineman. It was something Ryan Poles said at Indianapolis that he wants his guys to be lean and basically put your track shoes on. So you wanted to comment on some of those things because you're very familiar with the program that the Bears are instilling over at Hallis Hall.
Right. Well, you know, the type of blocking scheme they're going to use, the zone scheme, these guys got to be able to move, adjust on the move, play in space. So from a philosophical point of view, it's different than what they did with Juan Castillo last year. And Juan wanted these real big guys. Now, if you recall, the Larry Borum played at 350 plus at Missouri in 2020, got down to 322 for his pro day and was about that same weight when the Bears drafted him. But then Juan wanted him back up into the 330s. Mm-hmm. Okay, they're going to want these guys smaller than that. Like I think James Daniels last year was up close to 330 pounds. If they re-sign him, and we'll get to that in a minute, you know, he'll probably be playing closer to 315. You're not losing strength by losing weight. Now, here's the thing, and Jimmy Arthur was brought in as the head strength coach, and Jimmy was here when I was there under Rusty Jones. They also brought in one of the assistants who was with Rusty in Indianapolis the last few years. So he knows that program, and they're real big on percentage of body fat. And they use this machine. We used to have one. I don't know if they still have one there at Hallis Hall. If they don't, they'll go out and buy one, and I don't know how much they cost. They cost a fortune, though. It's called the Bod Pod, and it's this big egg-shaped device that you sit in for a couple of minutes, and air molecules float around, and it gives you your body fat, and it's probably accurate to less than 0.1%.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so at each position, you've got assigned body fats for these guys. Yeah, that's a pretty good idea what it is. Okay. So you've, let's say an offensive line, and I don't remember all the different assigned body fats, but let's say offensive linemen are 22%. That doesn't necessarily mean that a guy can't weigh 330 and still be 22% body fat. As long as he's in that percentage body fat range, that's fine. If he's got to get down to 318 to do that, then you got to get down to 318. But if you could stay at 330 and you're going to have the assigned body fat, then that's what you're going to have to do. So it's not complicated. Like you want your wide receivers 6 to 8% body fat. They're real lean. Running backs are a little heavier. Linebackers are, you can carry a little bit more fat, but those positions. And one guy who could not fit, and it was just his body makeup because we tried everything, was Nate Vasher. I think Peanut was around 6.8%. I mean, he was real lean. And then Nate Vasher, you'd stick him in the bod pod and he'd come out like 13 and a half, 14, way over. And he wasn't fat. It just that was just the way his body composition was. And so it would frustrate the shit out of Rusty, because Rusty really, he lived by that. He can't play. Forget. He goes, I don't know if they can play on the field, but I'm telling you right now, he can't play because he's too fat.
That's funny.
Then you find out about the player, and it's like anything else, there's an exception. Okay. So Nate Vasher was a Pro Bowl level corner and a pretty good returner too before we got Devin. So he was the exception, but for the most part, all those guys were always within the assigned parameters. But this way, if they're not, it costs you money.
Yeah. Okay. So there's fines associated with this.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
I love it. Olin Kreutz on his outstanding podcast with Jason McKee, the No Name Football podcast, was concerned about this new approach. Not that he's saying it doesn't work, but he said he wanted to pose questions to Ryan Poles and Jim Arthur and the other people implementing this program. So I grabbed a snippet of the No Name Football podcast. Let's listen to it. You may have already answered this question, but let's listen to Olin's concerns, and then on the other end, you can address them.
What lean mass, what body fat equals elite line play? Here's my question, right? Okay.
Very true.
So if we're going to get a guy to lose weight, does he actually play better football at that weight, right? What weight, what lean mass does this guy have to be? And hopefully, for as long as these guys have all been around the NFL, hopefully they have numbers on this, right? There's a guy out in Ohio who helps me with training people. His name is John Quint. Really intelligent guy. Teaches me a lot about things like that. Like his question always is, if you want someone to lose weight or you want someone to get lean mass, what body fat actually equals elite offensive line play? So, because it's easy to say that.
Right.
We want this guy to lose weight.
Right.
Okay, well, if he loses weight and gets really weak and gets run over, then we have a problem. So, all I'm saying is you can do all that. You just have to be cognizant of, okay, we can't make him incredibly weak either, right? So, what body fat actually equals elite offensive line play? And most guys will carry a little extra weight. They could use cleaning up their diet a little bit. But if you go out there and I'm going to condition these linemen in February, March, and April, and May, well, then when are they building the strength they're going to need in December?
Is that a legitimate concern for Olin?
Yeah, but Olin has always been in this program, I mean, for a good part of his career. So he understands it. And he always fell within the parameters. Olin was not a big guy. I mean, as compared to some of the linemen today, Olin played 285, 290, and was very lean. And what you're looking at when you're looking at this percentage of body fat and leanness is what's your muscle weight. So you might be 330 pounds, but you're 20%, you got 20% fat.
Okay.
So that's 60 something pounds off that 330. So he's like 265, 270 lean weight. Okay. And all the rest is considered fat or whatever. So it's forward thinking, but it keeps, and I agree with Olin, you don't want to lose weight at the cost of losing strength. So so your training works both, so that you what you're trying to do is gain muscle mass, lose body fat. You don't want to lose muscle mass and lose weight. You follow what I'm saying?
Sure.
You want to gain muscle mass, lose body fat, and then you're at an optimum playing weight or in an optimum body fat percentage.
Right. I recall when the Bears drafted Hronis Garasu, who was lean, fast moving, but I went over to Bourbonnais and boy, he was being blown off the line of scrimmage. He just did not have the strength in his rookie.
Well, he wasn't there with Rusty now. Rusty was already gone by then.
Good point. Now, this program with Rusty, I've got up. Jason McKee tweeted out the strength and conditioning manual from 2006. This is essentially the same thing that was being taught back then, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but yeah, that is a huge concern because one of the biggest complaints about Sam Mustipher, the center, and we don't know if he's going to be on the roster next season, but was that he just didn't have the strength to anchor at that center position. Can you ask a Sam Mustipher to lose weight and gain strength and expect that to yield results?
Well, here's what you want. It's a simple answer, Aldo. You want good weight. Okay, Juan wanted weight, not necessarily weight tied to muscle mass.
Gotcha.
And this is where you get into the science of weightlifting and nutrition and everything else. So it's what you eat. So he wanted these guys big. He wanted Sam Mustipher up over 320, and I think by the end of the year he was 325 or something like that. Well, number one, you can't move as good. Okay, and you're only going to get as strong as you can get, and you work in the weight room, and your gains are your gains. And if you can do it, you can do it. If you don't, you don't. But then you go on to the next guy. I agree that with offensive linemen, everybody looks at that damn bench press at the combine. It means absolutely nothing. Because with an offensive lineman, your power is down through your core, your hips, your thighs. That's where you're snapping your hips and you're blowing people off. Now, yeah, the bench press is your punch and pass protection and stuff, and that's where you're using that. But it's still an offensive lineman's ability to move people off the ball doesn't come from his bench press. It's how much weight he's got or how much power he's got in his lower body. That's why I always look at the jumps with the offensive lineman, both the broad jump and the vertical jump, because, and I look at their frame. I don't want a narrow hip guy. It's one of the things I like about James Daniels. He's got a keister that's about this wide. So that's a big power pack back there. So it's a good program. I firmly believe there's a lot of flexibility involved in that program with the stuff that they do. Now Jimmy may, he's going to probably put his own touches on it as compared to what Rusty, but just the pure fact that he brings in an assistant who's been with Rusty the last 4 years in Indy, that tells you a lot.
Yeah.
You want somebody who really knows and understands the program, and the players are going to love it. I mean, the players bought into it. I'll tell you a funny story with Rusty though. This is his first year. So when was his first year? 2004, might have been 2003. We might not even had, Lovey might not have been here yet. I don't quite remember his exact first year, or it might have been Lovey's second year. But anyway, there used to be this tradition. On Saturdays, you'd have a walkthrough and a meeting before you'd either get on the plane or go downtown to the downtown Hilton for a Sunday game. And so the tradition was rookies brought in donuts for everybody. So in come the rookies with all the donuts, and they're out on all over these tables in the cafeteria area at Hallis Hall. And Rusty walks in and he just exploded. I mean, he was MF everything. And he, rips these things off the table. He throws them all out. And he goes, "You son of a bitches work all week to ruin it on one day?"
I love it.
So that tradition ended that day.
Oh, man, that is a great story. Hey, I wanted to ask you, over at ChicagoBears.com, they did an exclusive interview with Ryan Poles. And one of the questions was just touching on the combine, and we'll get back to more about the combine later in the show. But the question was, how much weight do you place on position drills, the bench press, the 40-yard dash, and agility drills at the combine? And his response is, there's an eye test for the positional drills and how they move and their hips. It's all about, does it match the tape? Is that your philosophy too?
Yeah, I don't necessarily look at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I look at how he does it. And I'll tell you why. And we might have said this, previous years. The 3-cone, the 20 shuttle,
mm-hmm.
they become learned drills.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you go to your workout camp and to get ready for the combine, and you're there for 6 to 8 weeks and working out every day.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing the 20 shuttle every day. You're doing starts on your 40 every day. You're working on your bench, everything. They're doing specific exercises to increase your broad jump and your vertical jump. So you get your steps down real good
Mm-hmm.
for the 20-yard shuttle and the 3-cone, and then you blow off a really fast time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you might be stiff as a dick if and still be able to do it because of you're practicing the drill.
Got it.
So you gotta. It's a combination of the two.
Mm-hmm.
When you watch it, I'll tell you what I love to do after the combine. And now it's all digitized, but we used to get it on beta tapes, and
Mm-hmm.
they'd have let's say with the defensive lineman, there'd be 5 tapes
Mm-hmm.
of the defensive line workouts, but they would have it, player A, player B, player C. They'd have his entire workout. So it'd be his 40s, his agility drills, his vertical, his long jump, and his positional drills all at once. So, let's say it's 6, the tape might run 6-7 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
Of him actually doing work. Then you're on to the next guy, to the next guy, to the next guy. It's in alphabetical order. But when you do that back to back to back, it's real easy to stack them as who had the best workout.
Yeah.
So you're not looking at the 40 and that's all we can do right now, because you can find some of this stuff online, but you don't get it, one guy's complete drill and then be able to compare it to the next guy, to the next guy, to the next guy.
Interesting. And one of the things that you mentioned to me is Eberfus had talked about building position profiles, and you told me that's something that you did back when you were with the Bears. Tell me more about that position profiles. How's that work?
Yeah, we did it when Lovey came in and went to the scheme that they're going to be doing now, and what we did is we assigned a scout to a coach, and and that was his cross check position too for scouting.
Okay.
And you didn't switch positions every year. You stayed with, I tried to put the guy who was like Ballard did the defensive backs because he was great with defensive backs. Mark Sadowski was a defensive lineman when he played. He was really, really good with defensive linemen. So he had the defensive lineman, and you do stuff, Marty Barrett was a quarterback in college, but really understood wide receiver play. So he had the wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
So they work with the coach, during the off season and when they're in the building, and we put together a profile for exactly what we're looking for every position, all 22 positions on the field. Mm-hmm. And really now you could say 23 because you got nickel corner.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'd write it up. And each scout would have a copy of the write-up, and we had a profile tape.
Mm-hmm.
This is what, and we use some of our own players. And when Lovey first got here, we had some other players. But, this is what you want a 3 technique to do. This is what the right end's got to do. This is what the left end's got to be able to do. So the scout has a picture of in his mind what you're looking for when you're out on the road scouting. Yeah. And does he fit the profile? Because in any scheme, it's all about fit. Mm-hmm. You can't. Perfect example. Ted Washington was a great player in his own way. You can't put Ted Washington in this scheme.
No,
it just doesn't work.
That's right.
So, regardless of how good he is, he's not even on your draft board because you're not going to take him. I hate the square peg round hole thing, but that's exactly what that is.
Mm-hmm.
So you put them aside. You put the grade they deserve on them, but you don't even have them on the board, so you can't. When you get to the draft, you can't even think about them.
Mm-hmm. That is interesting because a lot of times, I'll go back and look at the drafts from previous years, and I'll play Mr. Hindsight is 2020 and say, wow, this pick was chosen 7 picks after we made that 3rd round pick. We should have picked that guy. Well, there's more to it than just that. Perhaps that guy didn't fit a scheme, perhaps. And then some of the other things that I've learned talking to you is, perhaps that guy didn't set the wrong things during the one-on-one interviews and so forth. So it's not just about it's not as black and white as it seems so many times. Really good stuff. You wanted to talk about free agency and some of the players that may match up with what the Chicago Bears are doing. So let's get into free agency, and then in the last third of the show, we'll talk about the combine and what we saw this weekend. Tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are on NFL free agency under Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus.
Well, number one, I'm going to take Ryan at his word for what he said. And what he came out right away. He goes, I don't like the first wave of free agency. You always overspend. And you do. You spend too much money and for a guy, and it ends up killing your cap down the road, and the guy better produce. You're better off getting a young player. And a perfect example was when the Bears signed Akeem Hicks. It was a player that was just starting to come into his own as a player, and you got him at a real reasonable price. And then he just kept making more money because he kept getting better, and turned into an all-pro type player. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to go out and get these big ticket $18 million, $20 million, $22 million players in order to improve your team. A lot of it's scouting. How good your scouting department, and this in this case, it's not college scouting; it's your pro scouting. Because these guys have already played in the league 4 years, and maybe there's a couple of guys hitting free agency, and this is all hypothetical.
Okay,
but maybe some guys hitting free agency that were the number 3 guy on their team at the position. Mm-hmm. When they played really well. Mm-hmm. But the 2 guys ahead of him were pretty damn good.
All right.
Okay, so all this guy needs is the opportunity to line up and play. Mm-hmm. Okay, but because of the situation that he was in, you're going to get him at a lesser price. Now, is the name sexy? No. Mm-hmm. No, when it becomes sexy, when he lines up for you in September and he starts playing good football.
That's right.
And then, oh, yeah, this guy's a steal. So that's what I see the Bears doing. I see all this stuff on Twitter. They're going to go after Amari Cooper. They're going to go after this guy. No, they're not. Mm-hmm. Because they can't spend all their money on one position and for one player. So here's the thing. So A-Rob still wants that $18, $19 million figure.
Right.
Some of these other guys, I said Tyreek Hill might be getting $21, $22 million, something like that. forget those guys. Nobody's going to be getting anywhere near to that. But now you look at some of the guys that are going to make the receiving core a lot better than it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the important thing, improving the position group. Okay, and I'm using Spot Track's market value. Take it for what it's worth. It could be, what he actually gets and what they feel the market value is could be two different things, but still it can give you a general idea. And okay, Demarcus Robinson, backup wide receiver with the Chiefs. He started 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
Market value $2.9 million.
Now,
okay, if he's the only guy you signed, he's across from Mooney because he's better than anybody else they got. Okay. Okay. Valdez-Scantling, big play guy, and he can run like hell, $8.8 million. He didn't have a market value for Russell Gage with the Falcons, but I assume it's in that same area as Cedric Wilson and Alan Lazard. And Cedric Wilson is $6.5 million. Alan Lazard, who's an RFA, and we're going to probably know by the end of the week, next Monday at the latest, because if they tendered him at all, and at what round? I'll tell you, if they tender him at a 3, I might think, okay, you know what? I can't get a receiver that good in the 3rd round.
I'm with you, Greg. By the way, he scored 8 touchdowns last season, which is, of all the free agent wide receivers, the second most of any free agent wide receiver hitting the market. And this guy was not underutilized, but Aaron Rodgers always looked Devontae Adams first and foremost. And there were times Lazard was wide open, but please go ahead.
Yeah, there's guys out there. Okay, Christian Kirk, though, he had a pretty good year. He's the highest of these lesser echelon receivers at about $11.8 million.
Mm-hmm.
Still, you can get 2 and maybe 3 of these guys for the cost of one A-Rob guy down in Tampa Bay who's coming off an ACL. Gallup's coming off an ACL. All these guys are, so doesn't it make sense to go in that direction in free agency?
Mm-hmm.
Say now let's look at the cornerback positions. One of the things we always used to talk about when I was working there was you got to draft high the positions that you end up paying for in free agency. And one of those positions is corner. Corners cost. Look at the money Kyle Fuller got when they put the transitional tag on him, and then Green Bay gives him the offer sheet for over $14 million a year, close to $15 million a year. And it's gone up since then. Corners make big money.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to go into free agency and say, I got to get a corner, well, again, you better be looking for that second tier guy. And the Bears have had some success, say like Prince of Makamura and things like that, where they've gotten, and for some reason, they just didn't play up to their capability, and they were able to get them at a cheap rate, but they got to be able to do what the scheme calls for them to do, number one. And, they got to have football left in them. But the main thing is it's sometimes easier to draft a guy at that position and hope he develops and have to overpay for that guy in free agency for somebody at that position in free agency. I don't know if I wrote down corner costs on here. Oh yeah, I did for a couple. J.C. Jackson with the Patriots, $21 million. Javarius Ward, $9.9 million. Darius Williams, $14.6 million. Levi Walker, he's been a 1-year starter in Buffalo, $9 million.
Wow. The value of cornerbacks has increased so much the last few years.
Right. So you've got to take all that stuff into consideration, but you also got to look at what's available in free agency. Who are the guys there? What's it going to cost versus who can I draft?
Yeah.
And then go there. Now, it's going to be up to the powers that be, obviously, whether they re-sign James Daniels or let him hit the market. Okay, now Bigsy is on record as saying that he talked to some agents down at Mobile and they said $9 million. Well, Spot Track had Daniel's contract market value at 7.3. Okay. Kappa, the guard at Tampa Bay, 10.8 million. And Austin Corbett for the Raiders, 8.7 million. So is it if it costs you $8 million to keep James Daniels and the coaches want him? That's the important thing. Okay. And they're not going to tell us that until you see that a contract's signed.
Exactly.
So that's the stuff that's going on in Hallis Hall. And anybody who says they're going to do this or they're going to do that, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Because the last thing they're going to do is start telling people.
That's for sure. The fact that there's a lot of depth at the offensive line position in this draft is probably going to it's not a player's market at that position for free agents, correct? So if some people think it's $10 million for James Daniels, perhaps it's more like $7 million because there's a lot of worthy candidates in the second, third round at that interior offensive line position. Am I right?
Well, Spot Track does a pretty good job.
Yeah, they do.
As far as finding, they're looking at similar players, similar years in the league, similar number of starts and all that position. So that's going to be somewhere in the area. Could you pay a premium? Up to $9 million, maybe. But are you better off keeping James Daniels at say $8 to $9 million a year versus letting him hit free agency and hoping you can find a replacement in the draft? Okay, well, you're going to be playing with probably two young guys as it is next year in Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borum. So how many young guys do you want on that line? And, I can't answer the question. That's going to be, in the hands of the coaching staff. But it's what's going on. And right now, free agency starts in a week. They've already made their mind up. And when they were in Indy last week, they already had discussions with agents. And you got a general idea what it's going to cost to re-sign a Bilal Nichols, which, okay, perfect example, Bilal Nichols. And Spot Track did not have a market value for him because I looked it up right before we went on air. But I don't see in this draft, there's a lot of defensive tackles. I don't see them necessarily being three techniques. Okay. And there's a few, but you got to get them high. And you don't have a 1, you got a 2 and a 3. Okay. You probably got to draft a corner. And history says, and I did this study back in 2001, my last draft with the Giants before I came here. And because we knew we were going to take a corner, and it holds up today because I still follow it. In the first 3 rounds, 12 to 15 corners go every year. And so that means, and it's not, generally it's a second and third round draft with corners, depending this year you could see 5 go in the first round. But that's an abnormal number. So now you're looking at where the Bears are picking at 39. You could very well be looking at the 6th or 7th corner off the board. Now, does that mean he's the 6th or 7th on their board? Well, it could well be the 3rd, because everybody's board is different. But if you want a corner that's going to come in and play, you got to get them in the second, or especially, because they don't have a first, you got to get them in the first 3 rounds of the draft.
Yeah. Because the odds of you hitting on one later in day 3 are just not real high. Greg, I need to interrupt because thanks to Don Burr, our friend from Detroit, he has made us aware of some breaking news. This, according to Tom Pelissero, the NFL is suspending Falcons wide receiver Calvin Ridley indefinitely for at least the 2022 season for gambling on NFL games after he left the team last season. So what do you make of that news?
Man, you may never see him in the league again.
Yeah, that might be an issue. I mean, who is going to take a chance on a guy like that? And he actually left the team last season because
of personal issues or something.
Right, some mental health issues he said he needed to address. And who knows if it was related to gambling. I mean, I know a lot of people who wager more than they have and sometimes wager with unseemly types, and that can create a lot of stress in their lives or has created stress in their life. So who knows? I'm speculating here, but that is huge news, and I'm sure now people start asking questions, whether referees involved, whether other players involved, and so forth. So this could open up a whole new bailiwick. And as it turns out for the Bears, people who were speculating or desiring Calvin Ridley in a trade, well, forget about that. That ain't going to happen.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite fouls on Twitter was speculating that, and then he, the guy who throws shit at the wall and hopes that one out of every 50 stick. Mm-hmm. But no, Calvin Ridley is a very good player, but obviously his own worst enemy.
Yep.
He's costing himself millions upon millions upon millions of dollars.
Yeah. It's sad. Hopefully we'll get more details, but again, that could be a personal matter, and we may not hear very much more. But hopefully the Ridley family is doing well, because that's going to be traumatic for the entire family as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, he was a first round pick, and was gonna. He didn't get paid for half the year last year. Mm-hmm. He's going to miss out all this year. If he comes back next year. And I say if, because the league is going to probably make him get into some programs and counseling, etc. What kind of money is he going to get?
Right.
Not a whole lot. Well, technically, if Atlanta held on to him, they'd still have his rights. He's been suspended. They'd still have his rights. He'd have that contract. But do they want to even keep him following that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And we're not going to know that until next year.
Yeah. Wow. That's big news. And as Don says, it appears that the wide receiver pool in terms of free agency is drying up. Fortunately, boy, oh boy, the wide receiver pool at the combine was quite impressive, at least in terms of speed numbers. Do you think that they may have done something to the turf in Indianapolis to get some of these?
It's a training they do.
It's amazing. There was a portion of the combine I was watching yesterday on Sunday. The defensive back after defensive back was posting 4.4, 4.4, 4.4. It was like
actually the safeties with the unofficial times. The safeties were faster in the corners.
Oh my goodness! It was unbelievable what is going on. And of course, the big news was the big defensive tackle, Jordan Davis, putting up an incredible sub 5.8. What was it?
4.78.
4.78. Look at this guy move. That's the unofficial. So, but it turned out to be 4.78, as Greg just said. What do you think about this athlete? Because he appears to be
also broad jump. Now, when you watch this, you see he doesn't have great bend. He's a little bit upright.
Yep.
Doing that. So he's going to have to work on that. He might have a little tightness in his knees, and you can see that when he runs too.
Yeah.
But a big, strong, quick guy, pretty good person from what I understand. And he's going to, he was thought of as a middle third of the first round pick. And he's probably, with those rare traits, go higher than that.
Yeah.
And, Dontari Poe was the last big guy that had a freak type workout, was a dominant player early, and then he got heavy. And that's what you want to make sure with a guy like this. You got to know what kind of character he has, that he's not going to, he's 340 now. Is he going to balloon up to 370 and be a slow guy and lose that quickness? That whole Georgia team, I mean, my God, the way they ran.
Yes.
The Wyatt is an interesting guy who actually ran like 100th of a second faster, 4.77 or something like that.
Yeah.
And he potentially could play 3.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't watched tape on him, just looking at his athleticism.
Mm-hmm.
But the 3 technique in this defense, he's got to be a guy that is disruptive as hell.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 1-gap scheme, so you don't have to do that 2-gap game and control two gaps. You're trying to shoot a gap, get inside, get penetration, and really screw things up, make the backs change direction, and clean it up for the linebackers, to make the play. So, but looking at that position, I just didn't see a lot of guys that were potential 3s. There's a few, but when do you got to get them? One is from Oklahoma, and actually he's a Chicago kid. Winfrey, I think his name is. Athletically, he's got the opportunity to be a pretty decent 3. But I've seen some tape. I haven't seen a lot, but you're going to probably have to get them in the second round to get them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now that brings up the thing. Okay, is it worthwhile? Are we better off re-signing Bilal Nichols?
Mm-hmm.
That's and the whole thing I'm trying to say is Aldo, is these are the discussions that you're having at Hallis Hall, and when you're determining whether you're going to try to re-sign somebody or let him hit free agency, and if in fact, now if they say I don't think he can play the 3, they're going to let him go.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of letting go, the big news, I think the first one to kind of speculate about this late last week in his column was Brad Biggs about the potential trading of Khalil Mack, and that it could potentially mean a second rounder and a third rounder for the Chicago Bears if the same model is followed of the Von Miller trade. Now, you have said that it's highly unlikely that the Bears are going to trade Khalil Mack. Based on what if you read Brad's column and what you're hearing, is there any chance that the Bears might consider moving Khalil Mack to acquire more draft assets, given that they only have 5 picks this season, and a trade similar to the Von Miller would yield 2 second round? They would get in the draft 2 second rounders and 2 third rounders, which now changes the whole complexion of the draft for the Bears.
Well, yeah, but are the 2 second and 2 thirds this year? Sometimes you got to wait for them for another year because the team you're making the trade with doesn't have that stock of draft choices.
Mm-hmm.
And well, here's the thing. You're saving roughly, you're adding to your amount of money to spend only $3.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to have $23 million, over $23 million of dead money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what is better for the team? Having Khalil Mack and not having $3 million in space,
mm-hmm.
or not having Khalil Mack for $3 million? Because that's basically what it is.
And maybe Chris's question here is a good one. Is this season going to be a rebuild, and the season after start making some bigger free agent signings? Because there should be, despite the fact that you've put this debt on yourself with the Khalil Mack trade, if that were to happen, there still would be more money available in 2023 to spend on some higher price free agents.
You look at, to me, the time to trade Khalil Mack could be a year from now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and maybe you don't get quite as much, but you still got more money to work with, and you got to figure in the money because the money equals players.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough, and that's what you go through these things. You got to figure out. You see, my thinking is you got to have 4 pass rushers. Now, Eberfus, he did an interview with somebody. He said, "Well, I got to have 8. You got to have 8 defensive linemen because you're always doing rotation. So that's 4 edge guys and 4 inside guys, and you might be lining up playing all 8 of them or at least 7 of them in the course of a game. And so right now, if under contract, they got 4 edge players. Ocho, they signed last year. Quinn, Mack, and Gibson.
Right.
Okay, not a bad crew. And Ocho is, he isn't breaking the bank with the money you're giving him. He got hurt, but before he got hurt, he had some production. So what they've got to take care of is the interior defensive line. Does Eddie Goldman, for what you got to pay him now, if you get rid of him, you're going to pick up $6 million. Okay, so that's another thing too. Let's say they don't think Bilal Nichols can play the 3. They want the 3. That they can't do what they want the 3 to do. Okay, but he can be their nose, and the nose isn't like the nose in this pass defense. The nose is really more of in the one gap, and sometimes cocked over the center or whatever. So again, not a 2-gap type guy. He is explosive. He was a sub when he came out. He was like a 4.87 or something like that. I don't remember exactly what his numbers were, but they're pretty darn good. And he was strong. So that's another guy. You get him in the bod pod, you get his body fat, you get to the optimum body fat and get his weight down. And then can he be a reliable 3, or can he be even if you got to keep him at whatever that number is, the nose, and then who's the 3? Well, is Henderson a 3? And looking at his athleticism, I'd say yes, but you still don't have enough. And there's one guy in free agency, started games for the Colts, was a backup. They took him in the 2nd or 3rd round. I can't think of his name. Lewis, I think his name is.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find him. Because didn't you text me about him?
I don't think so.
Okay, let me see. Hold on. But go ahead with your thought, and I'll find out.
Okay, but I mean, you got to get people, and they don't necessarily have to be starters, but they got to be people that can play within the rotation. Because right now in the National Football League, very few defensive linemen play a whole game. You're constantly rotating them off to keep them fresh and to keep your pass rush strong. So, another thought I had on the 3 technique, because it goes back to, we drafted Henry Melton. Okay, Henry Melton started off at Texas as a running back, and actually was a pretty good running back. Then he outgrew the running back position, and they moved him to defensive end. We drafted him at first to play defensive end, but then when we got him in the building, and he played defensive end that first year, but you saw the frame he had, how big he could get and still have that speed and quickness. We moved him inside, put weight on him, moved him inside to the 3 technique. He went to a Pro Bowl.
Wow.
Okay, and so this guy from the Colts I was just talking about is from Ohio State.
Is Tyquan Lewis and
yes,
Tyquan Lewis.
Tyquan Lewis. Yeah. Okay, he was a premium round pick. You can probably look it up while I'm talking what he was. He might have been 2nd or 3rd round, but he was fairly high. He was a defensive end, and they bulked him up to move inside. You couldn't do that. If there's some defensive ends in this draft that 270, 275 that got good movement that you can put 10 or 15 pounds on without a problem, then you can move them inside. Hopefully, Tommy Harris was 285 to 290 pounds when he played for the Bears. Very, very explosive. And I was going to say this when we were showing the big guy running. Tommy Harris was 295 at the combine, played at about 10 pounds less for us. He ran a 4.85. This guy was 340 pounds and ran a 4.78.
Oh, man. That's amazing.
Yep.
Taekwon is from Ohio State. He's 27 years old and 4 years of experience in the league.
Yeah, and he was a second-round pick. That's what I thought. But he was a defensive end at Ohio State. And I remember talking to Chris after. Yeah, they're going to put him in at the 3. And when you look at his frame, you can see that. You say, this guy and that scheme could be a 3 technique. So that's part of what the scouts are doing now. They've looked at these guys, they've seen their body types, they've seen the way they move, and now they're saying, hey, there's this defensive end here. He might be able to play inside. We can put a little more weight on him, play him in the rotation this year. He'll be 15 pounds heavier next year, and he could be a number 1 next year. And I'm guessing who that would be right now because I haven't done enough studying on the defensive line, but that is a possibility. That's what people want to know what's going on now. That's what's going on. Those types of discussions and deciding, because don't forget now, free agency negotiations start a week from today. You can start making deals a week from today. You can't sign a contract until a week from Wednesday. So, what we can determine what they're going to do in the draft, but what happens in the first week to 10 days of free agency. They're going to go hand in hand.
Right. Especially after, when we get into that second wave, after the first wave. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can sign a second wave guy in the first wave. I mean, you just don't give him as much money. But you get him a good deal that he's happy with. Now, like I say, we keep going to Allen Lazard. First, you got to find out what his tender's going to be. And a lot of that's going to have to do with Aaron Rodgers and Adams. And they want to take care of the corner. Did you hear Alexander?
Yep.
How much money are they going to have because the tender carries a dollar amount. So if Lazard gets tendered a second round pick, that's carrying like a $3.6 or $3.8 million salary.
Yeah. For
1 year. So do the Packers have the money to do that? Even though they like the player, are they going to have the money to do that? Okay, now it's $2 million something if they tender him a third. Well, if they tendered him a third, if I'm the Bears, I think I go after him because I don't know if I can get a receiver as good as him in a third round.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. It's going to be interesting too to see what this massive contract offer the Packers have allegedly put on the table for Aaron Rodgers to consider that could totally upend the quarterback market, according to people over at NFL Network. And if that's the case, who the hell is going to be running routes for Aaron Rodgers?
I'll tell you what they're going to do. They're going to draft receivers.
Yeah, exactly. They have to. It's almost like a rebuild. And that might be, if you believe the reports, why Aaron Rodgers is seriously considering moving on, because he knows that if he gets the money that he really thinks that he deserves from Green Bay and really wants, that there's just no money to do anything else. So,
well, here's the thing, Aldo. They're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. They're getting hit with over $20 million if he leaves.
Yeah. It's a tough situation for Green Bay. Boo hoo. Let's all cry. I wanted to ask you about linebacker Anthony Walker, who is now being highly touted as the potential middle linebacker. He's a free agent, played with the Browns, played with the Colts prior, so he knows this defense very well. Very smart player, a locker room leader. Everybody seems to like this guy, and the match for the Bears. What do you know about Anthony Walker?
He was a good player at Northwestern. Pretty good player for the Colts. I don't know why he left the Colts. I'd have to find that out, and ended up in Cleveland. Is he exactly what you want? There's a few guys at the combine that really, and I don't have my list. I can go into a page here just a second. I'll still be on camera, but
yeah, and I can tell you that according to Sports Illustrated, they write this about Walker, the quintessential free agent linebacker from a later phase of free agency. He's also a former member of the Eberfus's defense with the Colts for 3 years. He knows the scheme and should be reasonably priced at what Pro Football Focus believes will be a $4 million a year average, with about 5.2 guaranteed. So
yeah, but you know what the key is?
What is?
The key is, did Eberfus even like him?
Yeah.
Okay, I had. Oh, wait a minute. Here's.
Well, apparently, I think there was a report. I'd have to dig around for it. That Eberflus seemed to really like him, but I'd have to confirm that. 6'1", 235 pounder, was all around the ball, more in coverage, while in the coach scheme with 11 pass defended and 3 interceptions in 3 seasons under Eberflus. So what are your thoughts? Did you find your list?
Yeah, I dug it up here, linebacker. I'm waiting for it to.
Oh, the spinning wheel on computers, huh?
Yeah. Okay, well, you're not. They don't have a first. So who's available in the second? Okay, and there's a guy that jumps out, and I think I'm not real big on guys, really jumping up a lot when off of a good workout. You get what they call a combine bump, and then they settle back into where they really should be. Once all the glow comes off from the combine workout. 2 guys, actually, there's a few that I like that I think can play in the scheme. The one guy that jumps out, and I'm not, a week ago you would have said he's going to be there in the second round, and are you reaching a little bit to take him in the second round? And now, after his workout on Saturday, I'm thinking this sumbitch might go in the first round. And I'll tell you why in a second. It's Troy Anderson from Montana State.
Oh, yes.
Okay, he ran a 4.41, which is unbelievable. At 242, 243 pounds. The guy he reminded me of, and this is sacrilegious, Brian Urlacher.
Wow.
And now let's back up now. Let's go Brian Urlacher in 2000. Okay. Brian Urlacher was a safety at New Mexico. Okay. The first time he ever played linebacker, I think, was at the Senior Bowl. And actually, when the Bears drafted him in the top 10, and he played, because we played here. I was with the Giants for that 2000 year, and we played here in a game, and Brian was playing outside backer. I think it was a Sam backer for the first part of his rookie year, and he didn't play very good at Sam. It was a lot. Then they moved him inside, and then it took off. But part of it was being inside, because at safety you're in the middle of the field, middle linebacker you're in the middle of the field, and so it's how you're seeing the game. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it really is. But this guy is raw like Brian was raw. This guy started off as a quarterback and a running back.
God, please go ahead. I just got some general highlights of him playing as you discuss him.
And hell of an athlete. He's good in coverage, hustles, can run. So is he a guy you take? There's another one, Chad Muma from Wyoming.
Yeah. Yep.
Really good in coverage skills. But these guys are guys, some might get down into the third. Who knows? There's the I got to get down here a little further. I don't have I left my notebook in the other room. So there's a Wisconsin linebacker that's pretty good. There's one from Iowa that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
These guys, Leo Chenal from Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
But when you watch tape on him, you don't see him much in coverage, and in this defense, you got to be able to cover. But he's great against the run, and he's a good blitzing linebacker. So, Christian Harris from Alabama is pretty darn good. You might get him in the second round. You could be. I'm thinking right now that if they do what I anticipate them doing in free agency, and that is, that second level of wide receiver and stuff, and then you keep Daniels, that you could be actually your second and third round picks could be on the defensive side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
You could be going linebacker, defensive line. You could go offensive line, corner, or corner and linebacker rather. It might end up being your second and third round picks. If in fact, unless they bring back Ogletree, and that'll be the key. If they bring back Ogletree, that means you're not going to draft a guy in the second or third round as a linebacker.
Right.
Or if you sign the guy from Northwestern that was with the Colts.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's what the free agency tells you, is it takes certain positions out of play for that second and third round. Now, there's a lot of talk, should they trade back? And to trade back, for the Bears to pick up a fourth, they're at 39 right now. They have to go back at least 5 spots. So it'd be 44 or below to pick up a fourth round pick. You go back even a few slots more than that, and you're going to pick up maybe even a little bit more than a fourth.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe a fourth and a sixth or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they need picks, but the last thing you want to do is drop down a level player.
Exactly.
To make a trade.
Right. And it's enticing some of these players who are going to be drafted before 39. Boy, oh boy, it's enticing to maybe trade up and grab somebody who is going to take care of a certain position for the next 10 years. He's a plug and play player. There are a lot of names.
Well, the thing is, Aldo, they're in a position now, they trade up. They're giving away more capital that they already don't have.
Exactly.
I think that's out of the equation.
Yeah. And the trade value of certain players, we've talked about this. It's a really tricky situation. That's Ryan Bowles, the hand we were dealt. It's not a good hand.
Here's what when you're having these discussions of trading down. First of all, you're gonna, a few days before the draft, you're just gonna call, hey, our guy might not be here. Mm-hmm. We might be looking to trade down a few slots, and you're gonna already draw a line in the sand. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's say they're at 39, and the farthest they'll go back is 8 slots to 47, mm-hmm. or whatever. So you'll call, 40, 41, 42, and just say, hey, we might want to move back to see what we can get, because our guy might not be there. Mm-hmm. Now that part's a lie anyway, because they're hoping their guy still is there if they in fact trade down, and part of that's the research. But now you start putting together these packages. Let's say they pick up a fourth. So now you've picked up a second round and a fourth round, and now you do your in-house mock draft type things, and they're not necessarily assigning certain players to certain teams, but where I can get guys. Okay, if I drop down from 39 to 45 and it picks me up a mid-4th round pick, okay, I might still be able to get the guy I want, but this is the worst it's going to be is this guy. And is him and a package of, and then you've figured out who you can get in the 4th round. Is that package better than the guy I was going to get, for the team, than the guy I was going to get at 39?
Outstanding stuff. I want to get to a few questions that we have here. Let's start with Danger T. If Gabriel was the general manager, what position would he choose to upgrade first and then second? So you want to, I'm assuming that you feel the same way Ryan Poles does. You want to upgrade that offensive line, correct?
He wants better play. He doesn't necessarily say that he wants to. If you listen to what he says, he wants better play.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And part of it might be just being in better condition.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the key to that is, here's the thing. What would I do? Well, I don't know what they're going to do with Daniels. Tell me what they're going to do with Daniels first, and then I can tell you. Because now if you don't re-sign Daniels and don't sign another lineman in free agency to replace Daniels, then offensive line comes into that 2nd, 3rd round equation for, a month and a half from now. And so, I'm thinking, you got to get a corner. You got to get another corner because it's going to just cost you an arm and a leg to pay for a corner in free agency. You got to get receivers, but I don't want to pay the big money for a receiver. I've got those middle value guys that I put down there, and maybe you got to overpay them by $1 million. So what? They're still going to make your core a lot better than it is right now.
I've got I got another question here. It is from Mule Skinner. He wants to know, have you had a chance to look at tape from Cincinnati and the 2 prospects that are coming out of there? Willie Beavers, who plays, I forgot what position he plays. I think he's an offensive lineman. And then the safety, Brian Cook. Have you had a chance to look at tape of those guys?
I saw them live. I went to when they upset Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I was at that game. No, I concentrated, on the corners. They had a receiver. I'll tell you, there's the receiver they got. If he's available in the 3rd round and I haven't taken care of the receivers, and he's another Chicago kid, his name is Pierce, and he ran in the low 4.4s, you take him in a minute. Okay, now Jordan there says Willie Beavers is a Sam Backer.
Right.
A Sam Backer in this defense, of the 11 guys, he's 11.
Really?
He's not on the field that much.
Oh.
Because your base defense, really with the way offenses are played, you're really more in a sub. You're playing a 4-2-5.
Gotcha.
So you got your Mike and your Will. And then, if you're going to go to base and play with 3 linebackers, but sometimes that you could have different types of nickel packages where your 5th defensive back could be a safety or your 5th defensive back could be a corner. And that's going to be depending on the tendencies of the opponent that you're playing. What they do on certain down and distance situations. So that tell you, okay, well, I can, if you got a corner that can cover, then or rather a safety that can cover, then you're really in good shape because you've got that extra guy that can support the run, but he's also not going to hurt you in pass defense.
Another question here from PZ. Are you a draft for need kind of guy or a best player available kind of guy?
You know what? The biggest fallacy is the best player available because boards end up being set according to need. And it not purposely so,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just ends up being that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because you just end up putting a little bit more value on those guys. Now, theoretically, what you'd like is, okay, I'm sitting in the second round and I use our old grading system. And so let's say I'm looking at three guys with an A67 score.
Mm-hmm.
And, one's a corner, one's a wide receiver, and one's a 3 technique. Okay, they all got the same grade.
Mm-hmm.
So talent-wise, they're relatively equal. Which one's going to help us more today?
Good way to look
from those three positions.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, then you're saying, okay, I'm taking the best guy available because I'm taking the best guy that can help us today, regardless of the need. And I got a need at all three positions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Based on what you know now, Jordan asks, would Greg retain James Daniels and try to retain Jakeem Grant, whose price tag appears to be going up all the time, but I don't know why, because there's so many speedy returners out there. But what are your thoughts on Grant and Daniels? How hard would you be pounding the table to try and re-sign these guys?
Well, I'm cautious when I answer a question like that, only because I like James Daniels, and he's 24 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He's a little too heavy. I'd put him inside the center
mm-hmm.
instead of guard. But I don't know what Chris Morgan, the new offensive line coach, thinks of him.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's part of the equation. He's got to coach the guy. And remember, I've said numerous times, you can't shove a player down a coach's throat.
Mm-hmm.
If a coach doesn't want a player, doesn't think he can play in the scheme he wants, and it's never going to work. You got to move on from the guy. So if I knew what the Bears front office and the coaching staff knew of the player, then I'd say, yeah, if it's me, I'd want James Daniels, because like I said, he's 24 years old. The guy's played pretty good and he's smart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so and if that figure that Spot Track has at around 7.7 million is an accurate figure, well, hell, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's get it done. And if I'm him, maybe I'm thinking maybe I only want to do a 3-year deal or something, because then I'll be 27 and I can really hit the jackpot.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. That would work out for both sides. I love this question from Bear Truth 9. He says, how would pro scouting differ from college, or is it basically the same from a player evaluation perspective? So when you're a college scout and looking at high school players, is it different than when you're a pro scout looking for college?
No, he didn't mean it when you're scouting college versus scouting pro is what I think he means.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
Scouting college, you're projecting.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's this guy going to be when he gets to the NFL level? This is what he does. Let's say it's a wide receiver, and okay, let's use Kevin White as an example. Ended up busting, still in the league, by the way, but he, his physical attributes were rare.
Mm-hmm.
Could jump out of the building, run in the 4.3s, all that stuff. But then you go back and you look at the offense that he played at West Virginia. He only had his route tree was like 3 routes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't exposed to an NFL style passing scheme. And then once he was exposed to that scheme, part of this is, I'm guessing, is that he never got totally comfortable with it. When you're in the NFL, you got to make a lot of what they call sight adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, you're starting, you're coming off the ball, and depending on what you see the corner do or what you see the safety do will tell you what you're going to do with your route. In other words, there's options to the route
Mm-hmm.
for the play that was called. And if you can't do that at full speed, if you're thinking too much about it, all of a sudden this 4-3 guy's playing 4-7. And that's one of his big problems. He was a 4-3 guy that never, ever looked like a 4-3 guy when the tape turned on.
Interesting. Another question for you here.
But wait a minute, I didn't finish that last. Yeah. So pro scouting, they're already in the league. So you're seeing them against NFL competition. Now you got to determine, have they reached their ceiling, or is there still room to grow, or are they going to level off and start going downhill? And if they start going downhill, how far before, and you're guessing, how long will they still be a viable part? And that part of that has to do with, what you want to give them contractually.
When you're evaluating players at whatever level, do you go into as much detail as finding out what strength and conditioning programs they come from, what nutrition programs they come from? So if you're scouting a pro player, you might say, well, this guy, even though he's 30 years old, he's for the last several years, he's been playing for an organization that really values nutrition and strength. So I feel good about it. Or you're looking at a college player, this guy's got great numbers and metrics, but boy, oh boy, they do such a terrible job in this area of nutrition at college or whatever. He's probably going to be a fatso in 2 years in the NFL, something like that. Do you go that deep into the weeds?
Yeah. And well, first of all, from a nutrition standpoint, now in the last couple of years, the colleges have gotten better. The kids used to be basically, they had they might have fed them 2 meals a day or something, but they weren't as big on nutrition as they're starting to do now, but it's putting a lot more money into the program. And you got to build a cafeteria and all this. And, it's the amount of money. Notre Dame, which I follow, that's one of the things. They don't have enough room in their facility right now for, a cafeteria and a kitchen and all that you need, and then to have the right nutrition. So it's done in another building and then brought over. Okay, well, they want to expand that building, and now part of the discussion is, well, is it better off? Let's give this building to somebody else, in this, and build another building or whatever. But you've got to think into the future. Perfect example is Hallis Hall. When Hallis Hall, since I came here, has been expanded twice. And both times after we were gone, by the way. So we never got it. But I mean, it was tiny. I mean, compared to the original Hallis Hall was not that big. And even when we got here, there was a lot of people that were working downtown. And off-site instead of here. Now, when Phil Emery was here, they did an original expansion, and that helped, but it still wasn't big enough. And then Ryan Pace got that new thing put in. It cost him a ton of money, but now they got a state-of-the-art building.
Do you think that Olin Kreutz would politely ask you to leave the weight room because it was so crowded?
I told you what Olin used to say to me.
I know, that's why I'm asking.
No, and that was at 5 o'clock when there's no players around. Gabriel, get the fuck out of my weight room. And I go,
I think I got a commercial there. Another good question here. Jordan says, can you ask Greg what he thinks of the idea of Daxton Hill, that's the defensive back from Michigan, becoming a strong safety alongside Eddie Jackson, but rotating down as a full-time nickel to make our nickel package a full-time big nickel package?
Well, first of all, they don't have a chance in hell of getting him.
Yeah, he's going to go in the first round.
He's going in the first round. He's going to go between 20 and 30.
Oh, man.
I think he can play corner.
Really?
Yeah, he's you can play him at corner. You can be a free safety. You can be a strong safety. He can be your nickel. He can do a lot of things. And you saw him shit. He ran 4.41.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's got great athleticism. No, he wouldn't even think about him because he's going to be gone.
Well, and so much for that. Any other player at the combine that just jumps out at you from what you saw this weekend and say, holy cow, this guy really did better than expected? Or,
you know, I thought I had my list in here and I didn't. I left it out there because I had written down notes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can touch on another time. But it was interesting. But I don't get too excited over a workout because the tape is more important. And here's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Guy, when you're watching tape of a guy, you're putting estimates in your mind and on paper what you think the guy is as an athlete. You know, he's a plus athlete. He's got play speed of 4.45, yada, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm.
And now you get to the Indy and what he does it compare with what you thought he was going to do? Is it better, worse, or pretty much the same? Okay, good example. Kyle Hamilton, Notre Dame. He jumped out of the building, but he didn't run worth a damn.
Mm-hmm.
Ran 4.59. Everybody thought he was going to run faster than that. You watch him on the field, and his range from the center of the field to the sideline, where he made a couple long interceptions, he looks like a bullet. Mm-hmm. So, you know, he plays a lot faster than that 4.59. Now, I would suspect that because he didn't run as good as he wanted, because his vertical jump was 38 and his broad jump was 10'11", and his 3-cone was a sub 7-second 3-cone for a 6'4" guy. That's excellent. Because he's very leggy. You would think that he'd run again at the Notre Dame Pro Day at the end of the month, you know, to see if he can improve on that 4.59. But the one thing, what I used to do that's interesting also is that, you know, when you get all the data back from the combine, you're getting a 10, and these are all electronic times. You're getting a 10, a 20, and a 40.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so some guys that are like him are long-legged, and he's extremely long-legged. They're not necessarily quick starters. Mm-hmm. So that means from what's going to slow them in the 40 is that 1 to 10 isn't going to necessarily be that good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but what's their speed from 10 to 40 and 20 to 40? So now if his speed, his time from 10 to 40 and from 20 to 40 correlates with some of those guys running a tenth and a half faster, what's the problem with the 4.59? Besides nothing. Because especially at that position, you know, where he's not coming out of a 3-point stance ever.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Wanted to ask you before we pull the plug on this one about Kalen Barnes and the incredible 40 time that he ran at the combine.
That the Baylor receiver you're talking about?
No, the cornerback. From Baylor. You're right.
No, there was a Baylor receiver that ran fast and the corner.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's why I got him confused. What do you think about the corner who ran this incredible 40 at 4.29?
Well, I got to turn on the tape and see what he plays. I mean, see how he plays.
Mm-hmm.
Which I haven't watched yet. I mean, yeah, he's tall, he's long, and he's real fast. But can he play football?
Yeah.
Carl Lewis was real fast. He won a gold medal in the Olympics.
Couldn't play football. He couldn't sing either.
Okay, so you know that it's part of it. It's not just the workout.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to look at the does he play? Does he show that 4.3 speed when he's playing?
Mm-hmm.
Does he have fluid hips? With corners, it's imperative that you can flip your hips and you've got quick feet. And the other thing that's real important is your transition. In other words, you're going from a back pedal to forward.
Mm-hmm.
Guys that are going from back pedal to forward and they got to chop their feet.
Yeah.
To change, that slows them up. You're useless. I don't care. You might as well be 4.8.
Right.
Because that's taken, so you're negating that 4.3 speed because it takes you got to gather your feet in order to come out of the pedal. So those guys that can do it instantaneously, plant and drive, those are the guys you want. And some of those guys might be a 4.50 guy, but they have such exceptional body control and such great feet that they, they're great when they're playing the position.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Loads of information on this edition of Gabriel Talks Football. By the way, I've been thinking about shortening the name of the show, Gabriel Talks Football. Doesn't that sound better to you?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. It's your show.
As long as the check's in the mail. Oh, man, this is always fun. And let's do it again next week. We'll pick a day and a time at your convenience.
Let's wait till something happens.
Yeah, let's wait.
Not necessarily a signing.
Okay.
Well, it could be a signing with a veteran.
Mm-hmm.
Is Bilal Nichols re-signed? Is James Daniels re-signed?
That's huge.
Okay. What kind of tag is put on Alan Lazard?
Mm-hmm.
Who is actually going to be in free agency? Because they can re-sign contracts between now and a week from Wednesday and not hit free agency. So, let's wait a little bit on that. There's one guy I wanted to mention. There'll probably be some people that disagree with me, but I don't care. There's a lot of people that got the Michigan defensive end Hutchinson as potentially the number one pick. And our friend Daniel Jeremiah is one of those guys. And the guy's a hell of a player. I'm not taking anything away from him as a player. There's one thing that just after the combine that bothered the hell out of me. He got 32 and an 1/8 inch arms.
Wow. And that's shorter than you.
That's real short arms for an edge pass rusher.
Yeah.
And, I tweeted that out. I said that 32 and an 1/8 is going to bother somebody. Somebody said, you guys worry over fractions of an inch. Well, when I was working for the Bears, we did a study on pass rushers to find out what the common denominator was. It speed? Was it size? And it was neither. It was arm length. The guys with and it's leverage.
Yeah.
Okay, so think of the cartoons you see where the big bully's holding the other guy like this with his hands, and the other guy's swinging and he can't hit him because he's got short arms.
Exactly.
That's exactly what it is. And when he's got 32-inch arms and he's going up against a offensive tackle with 35, that guy's got a 3-inch advantage.
Yeah.
And let me tell you something, 3 inches is huge.
Right. Oh, yeah. And there are, of course, exceptions to that. As Don Burr points out, Jared Allen had the same length of arms. So there's always exception, and it's usually made up with incredible quickness. Am I right?
Yeah. Well, his 3-cone was great. It's like 6.76 or something. But his 40 wasn't that great. His 40 was in the 4.7s. That was good, not exceptional. And the guy's got a great motor. I'm just saying that it's not going to show. He's going to be a top 5 or top 6 player. I don't know if he's going to be a top 2 player, because I know there's going to be some teams that are going to say, they've got their numbers, and it's like, okay, I'll give you another example. There's a lot of people that won't take a corner shorter than 5'10". regardless of how good he is.
Mhm.
Okay, and I talked to Ballard a couple of years ago. I said, "What's your cutoff for corners?" He said 5'10.5". So don't look for the Bears to be signing any 5'9" corners, or drafting any 5'9" corners, because they don't fit the profile. And the other guy, the guy that bothered me with really short arms, that's got good tape, was McCready, the corner from Auburn. He's got 28.5-inch arms.
Wow.
Those are alligator arms. It's like, how are you going to make a play?
It's going to be difficult, especially if
really, you don't forget, now playing against college players, different story. Now he's going against the best of the best.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now you compare him to Peanut Tillman. You know, Peanut Tillman, he could tie his shoes standing up. His arms were so long.
That was it.
Nate Vasher had real long arms for a 5'10" guy.
Yeah, Tillman's long arms came in handy when he was matched up against Randy Moss. He made a lot of plays. Just
right, and so you know, I don't want to hear people say, "Oh, you make big things out of fractions of an inch." Fractions of an inch make a difference between a completion or a pass breakup.
The game is a game of inches, and player evaluations are a game. Or I was going to come up with a great saying, but I freaked it.
But you fricked it up.
I'll work on it for the next show, and we'll let people know when we are back on. All you got to do is subscribe to the Barroom Network here on YouTube, and follow Greg at Greg Gabe, and follow me at Barroom Network on the Twitter channel. And we also have activity going on our Facebook pages. So just give us a follow and let people know what we're all about. Hit that like button down there, and that always supposedly helps us get more recognition. So for Greg Gabriel, my name is Aldo Gandia. We will talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
See you later.